Greetings and welcome to the podcast. This is For the Love of Fiction, a podcast dedicated to discussing narrative and characterization across a wide range of mediums. I am your host, Gavin Groves, and this is my co-host, Mr. Mark Tobit.
What's happening, dude?
Hey man, how's it going?
Same old, same old.
That's definitely your catchphrase.
Yep.
You're locked into that now.
Fair
5
enough.
episodes in.
I can live with it.
So yes, we always start with a little preamble about what we've been up to recently, and I'm going to run this one first. So this year, unfortunately, one of my favourite authors passed away, Mr. Cormac McCarthy. I know you've read a little bit of Cormac McCarthy in your time, probably not as much as me, but I know you've read. What did you read? Did you read Blood Meridian?
Yes, I did.
Well, don't talk about that because I am planning a Cormac McCarthy dedicated special once I've completed the current novel I'm reading by him, which is Sutri, a semi-autobiographical novel published in 1979. It's an interesting one. I tend to find that McCarthy is not really known for his humour. If there is humour in his work, often it's quite dark for the most part. And this one, I'm over halfway through it, and it kind of reminds me of James Joyce's Ulysses or Steinbeck's work, Odyssey-esque, grand in scope, a man's life. It's interesting. I'm still working on it. I will go into more detail on it when I do my set up my dedicated special for Cormac McCarthy stuff. Apart from that, I also watched a film that I've been meaning to watch for years, finally, and it is a film called Taffin. Have you ever heard of this one? Pierce Brosnan.
I know of Taffin. I think you've actually shown me one or two clips from it. Specifically, Brosnan absolutely losing his shit at one point.
That's what it's most famous for. That's right.
Yeah.
Do you remember the comedians Adam and Joe? Not in the 90s.
Yes, so they were classic Channel 4. So
yeah, they utilised that scene and made it famous.
Yeah, I think that's
the story itself of the film is kind of like an Irish Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. It's set in Ireland, and it's about like an area in like a countryside, picturesque village-esque, and corporations are looking to build like a power factory that's going to ruin the environment, blah blah blah. And Pierce Brosnan plays Taffin, who's like this,
out of towner sort of thing.
He's not an out of towner. He lives in the village itself.
I see.
So, and that's kind of the reason why he gets involved eventually, because it's his home. But he is like a ruffian debt collector kind of character. Incidentally, he is miscast, because it's based on the book, and in the book, apparently, kind of like Tom Cruise in Jack Reacher. The book, he's nothing like Pierce Brosnan. Pierce Brosnan is far too handsome to be this character, and the love interest is like incredibly beautiful. It's so unbelievable. I mean, to be completely honest, I wouldn't say it is particularly a film that is worth anyone's time. It's really a curiosity. I watched it because of that scene from Adam and Joe. The scene that Mark is talking about, I just Google it, YouTube it, Taffin funny, Taffin Adam and Joe, it's out there. His lady girlfriend, after he's been beaten up, just complains or says something about how bad it is. Maybe we need to move away. And Taffin's response is in a really gruff, really aggressive Pierce Brosnan. Maybe you shouldn't be living here then. And it's just, yeah. I don't know what it is.
Is exceptional. I will be honest.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It because we're so used to the no foreplay Pierce Brosnan, the cool, suave Pierce Brosnan James Bond combination that we got for so long. Is it because we're used to that and seeing him absolutely lose his mind like that? Maybe is what makes it so funny. A little bit of trivia for the film, though. He did this film because he lost the part to Timothy Dalton for Bond.
See. I'd heard he'd been in consideration prior.
He had the role.
Oh, I didn't know he actually
had Bond,
it. Yeah.
but they prioritised Dalton first, and then he went and did Taffin. So another little piece of trivia for this film, though, that makes it interesting is that it features many actors / comedians from the classic 90s sitcom Father Ted. I am not joking. Like,
I'd find that distracting, to be honest.
it kind of is. At first, I didn't see it at first. It was off-putting to say the least. Initially, Taffy / Pierce Brosnan's lackey, I was like, who is that guy? I know that guy. He looks really, really familiar. And I was looking at his face. I could imagine him. I was imagining his voice. I was imagining him acting. And then there were two specific things that popped into my head. Him going, "Zzz, zzz, 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 zzz," punching Father Ted and talking about his big old hairy ass. Is Father Todd
Yeah.
Umptious, the guy that screws him over in the Christmas special? Gerald McSorley, his name is. Also, amazingly, Frank Kelly, who played Jack, Father Jack, the alcoholic, is an extremely well-spoken barman.
That'd be unsettling for me.
It's very strange. Apparently, he's a theatre actor in real life.
I mean, I almost don't want to see him doing anything other than Father Jack because I feel it'd destroy the illusion a little bit.
And Derek Morgan, who plays Father Ted, obviously actually plays a stand-up comedian very briefly in it. Also, Patrick Bergin, if you've ever heard of him, he was in quite a few films in the 90s. Robin Hood, off the top of my head.
Is those one of those you'd recognise him if you saw him? Sort of.
Yeah. He replaced Pierce Brosnan, ironically, in The Lawnmower Man 2 as well. But it's a curiosity film. I watched it because I've always wanted to see it because I've heard about it. It's not great, if I'm honest. At first, I was interested because I found like the setting quite nice. Pierce Brosnan looks out of place. He's way too pretty to be in this land filled of rough Irishmen, even though he's obviously Irish in real life, isn't he? But it's on YouTube. So what have you been up to?
No, I myself have been watching stuff. I've been reading stuff. Bits and pieces, but I'm just trying to think what warrants actually bringing up. I mean, I did get an opportunity to watch the latest DC release, which is the Blue Beetle.
Oh, what did you think?
I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I mean, I will be honest, recently DC has been a little lackluster in their releases. It feels like they're going through the motions a little bit. And this one was a movie that actually had quite a lot of charm to it.
I thought the trailers looked good.
Yeah, and I don't know if it warrants a full-on discussion, as in having its own segment on this pod, but I feel it warrants a mention that it is actually a very good movie. You
enjoyed it, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the fact that the actual characters that it's portraying are characters that I am actually quite a fan of from the original comics.
I like the Blue Beetle character.
Yes, and these actually they hit enough points in terms of the history and the lore to show that there's room for expansion because the Jaime Blue Beetle is the third Blue Beetle in line from the comics. There's been two previous ones, and the second is specifically my Beetle, if that makes sense. That's Ted Kord, and they've alluded to the fact that Ted Kord is on his way. So it's a series that I hope warrants a sequel because there is an unfortunate aspect of them making these movies and giving all the implication that it's going to go further than dropping it like a hot potato the moment the initial numbers
It's pretty obvious that they have basically been dumping all their movies to make way for the Gunverse that's coming.
Yeah, this is true. There is a clean sweep of the slate coming, and I hope this might be one that might make it through that purging because things like Black Adam, for instance, I know that was more or less dead on arrival. I mean, it wasn't a bad movie.
I'm pretty sure that Gal Gadot has been quite cagey about whether she's involved anymore. Maybe that's because she's been told not to say anything. Maybe that's because she is still involved. I don't know.
No, she appears more in cameos than she does in as starring in movies these days when it comes to the DC universe. So they hit that Amazon music, and then she turns up for 5 minutes, and then she goes. And it's like, okay, well, at least it's a cool song to hear. So to that end, if you get the chance, I'd encourage it. I mean, aside from the fact it's a superhero movie, it's actually a really good story and it's funny.
I am going to watch it at some point. I like the character, I like the suit. I've always liked the
design of it. Yeah.
Yes, it's a bit Guyver.
Yeah, this does. Yeah, exactly.
The last episode. Yeah, always liked that aspect of it.
And it does kind of push a little on that body horror. It doesn't go full on because you're not going to have a full on Tetsuo here. But nonetheless, it does have a couple of rather unsettling moments in it in that regard. So I strongly encourage.
Yeah.
Other than that, in terms of reading, been reading a couple of new mangas of late. Recently got into one called Lookism, which is a Korean manga. It's based on a story of a young boy who he's ugly, fat, he's bullied at school, wakes up one day in a new body, then finds he's actually become attractive. He's actually sort of like stunning. He's got muscular. He's capable of like sports, that sort of thing. Then turns around and realizes his old body is still lying on the ground behind him, and discovers that he has when he falls asleep in one body, he wakes up in the other.
Oh.
And then starts utilizing this just to at first make observations on society and finds how different people are treated depending on appearances. And it eventually builds like it's a really strange manga that starts off as like a slice of life romantic comedy with him using the opportunity to pursue his love interest and everything. Then around about issue 50, I feel that the editor or the writer maybe just turned around and gone, let's take this in a bit of a different direction. And now it's become a full-on gang warfare story with multiple characters, quite interesting and very well drawn fight sequences involving lots of different characters with different fight techniques, and it's all grounded in realism in terms of martial arts and the like. It's a very unusual story, and the writer has actually spun it off into a universe all of its own, where he's taken certain characters and written side stories for them that are running to this day, and that would be Manager Kim and Viral Hit, which are two interesting stories I've been following as well. It's a little bit different. So, as I say, I'm going to keep an eye on this one. I mean, I don't know if it's anywhere near the end or if it's only just getting started, but the way they like to use these things, they do like to keep them going. So, other than that, I haven't been really watching that much else. Got into a new mini series of The Continental, based in the John Wick universe.
Oh, I saw that with Mel Gibson, right?
Yeah. Who, once again, I think it's the first time I've seen Mel Gibson in anything in quite a while.
Yeah, he's not been around for a while.
I mean, I know that he's attained that A-star status wherein he is technically uncancelable. So despite that controversy that he experienced not too long ago...
He tried really hard to cancel himself.
It is. I feel once you hit a certain point, you're untouchable, you're Teflon. I mean, Tom Cruise, for instance, I mean, don't get me wrong, he is entertaining as all hell. But he is ever so slightly crazy. I mean, in terms of like the things he goes to in his movies, notwithstanding, in terms of the stunts he's willing to perform and everything, he now holds the record for the most base jumps with a motorcycle, thanks to his...
I was talking about Mission Impossible today, actually, because like I hadn't watched any of the new Mission Impossible films, and with the release of the new film just recently this year, 2023. What is it called?
Dead Reckoning.
Part 1. Dead Reckoning Part 1, right?
Yeah.
And basically, I saw the trailer and thought, that looks really good. And I've not paid attention to any of these films. And I chatted to you about it, and you said to me, they're actually pretty good, man. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. And I rewatched the first one, and I think we might have talked about it on a previous episode. But, like, yeah, Tom Cruise has sort of become insane.
Yeah,
right. He's like literally like the antithesis of all these other superhero like actors who are like on green screens and whatever. Because with each Mission Impossible film, he's still doing his own stunts, and they're getting more and more extravagant.
He's an adrenaline junkie pretending to be an actor.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, I have seen interviews with other actors where they've kind of called him out, so to speak, on this. Like Danny Trejo did a rather famous interview where he spoke about the fact that. Someone tried to go, well, you like to portray yourself as a tough man, but when it comes to the serious scenes, you get a stuntman to come in and take care of all of the dangerous stuff, don't you? And he goes, yeah, I do. Because you see those people behind the camera, you see that director, you see the 100 people that are working around catering through to production. All of those people have a job because I'm a part of this project. If something happens to me, they all lose their work. So, no, I'm not going to put their jobs on the risk just for me to feel a little bit of machismo. And it's like, that's a valid point. I mean, I get the whole wanting to sort of like experience abseiling down the side of the Burj Khalifa, but it's I get one way of Trejo on that one. Trejo, yeah. It's not something. I mean, nonetheless, it does lead to some very interesting cinema. I will be honest.
I liked Ghost Protocol a lot. Actually, I really liked it. I actually would warrant rewatching it. To be fair, and maybe watching the next couple afterwards. And I said I want to see the new one. I'll watch it when it comes on streaming services, though.
Yeah.
So that was it for you, yeah. With cool. Nothing else to talk about there. So this week we're going to be beginning our next on-off series, which is 80s movie classics. We're going to be discussing a pair of great movies today. One being Robocop and the second being Terminator. Interesting choice that we got this because they both collided, haven't they, in various forms of media as well, with the Frank Miller Robocop versus Terminator comic book series, the video games, etc., etc. Looking forward to this one.
They are two titles that they bear a lot of similarities with each other, don't they?
They do. So yeah, with that, we're going to jump into a break, and we're going to be right back.
Okay, so first we get to the first segment. This will be Robocop. Now, this is a movie that I've known for most of my life, and I've watched it on many occasions. It gives me an immense joy to watch it. It's a movie originally released in 1987, directed by Paul Verhoeven, and starring Peter Weller as Alex Murphy. And the story itself is a prime example of what I look for when I look for a movie. Now, Verhoeven's style is always interesting to watch. He's actually got 3 movies which are all close to my heart. I consider them my Verhoeven trilogy, if you want. That would be Robocop, Total Recall, and Starship Troopers.
Yeah, the science fiction trilogy.
Yes.
They call it.
Those 3 movies have a lot of what I ask for in cinema. They've got that tongue-in-cheek comedy that I like in any form of entertainment. Plus, they do have a lot of the old ultra-violence.
Biting, isn't it?
Yes.
Biting humour.
The humour is...
as savage as the violence.
It is. It's the kind of humour you feel bad for laughing at times.
Yeah.
Whether it be watching the cameraman get impaled in Starship Troopers or watching Arnold Schwarzenegger remove a significant tracking device from his nose. There's something very strange about Verhoeven's style. He does satire very well, however. He likes to send up certain elements of society, whether it be the military, whether it be the working sector with dreams of grandeur, or whether it be this one, which is corporate America. And how utterly insane some elements can be, especially when they're taken to extreme levels. But that's only part of it. The true story of this is all about Alex Murphy, who's a man with some naivete when he first becomes a police officer who gets horrendously gunned down. And when I say horrendously, that is one of the most brutal moments in cinema right there, isn't it?
Well, you see, I'm pretty sure that the theatrical cut of the film is what was released on VHS originally in the 80s. We didn't get the director's cut, I believe, until much later. And so that horrific gunning down sequence that we all saw as youngsters. How old were you when you first watched it, by the way?
I think I just hit double digits.
Really?
Yeah.
I watched it young, man. I must have been like not 7. It was, oh my God, mate, it's disturbing. Yeah, but then as I was saying, that gunning down sequence, yeah, like it's even gory if you watch the director's cut. It's so gory.
This is one thing that Verhoeven has actually said, is that he wanted to push the violence to comical levels.
Yes.
He wanted to make it almost satirical because he wanted to take the edge off the violence, if that makes sense. To make it
an interesting point that I read recently, actually, and it was actually in Caravan of Garbage, and their fantastic retrospective on the Robocop series. They said that they felt that the cinema theatrical cut, where they actually shortened the violence, made it more violent overall, because it left more to the imagination, and because with Verhoeven's version, there's so much of it, it's so excessive, it is almost too much and becomes comical, ironically, satirically.
I can believe that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
If you cut away at the right points, you'd remove that comedic edge or the dark humour of it, and it makes it all the more graphic at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was a story that was written by 2 gentlemen. It was Edward Neumeier and Michael Miner. And Newminer actually worked on Blade Runner in
Yes,
'82,
yes,
and
yes.
he started working on Robocop off the back of that. And you can see a lot of the elements of Blade Runner in this. This is, for all intents and purposes, a cyberpunk story.
Yes.
And it's a little cleaner than most cyberpunk, but a lot of the elements are still there. I mean, it's got the grimy streets and everything.
That's it. Yeah, there is definitely a social distance between the corporate bigwigs and the street level violence that's depicted.
Yeah. And that is one thing that's prevalent in a lot of cyberpunk media, is that whole element of the grimy underworld and the almost utopian overworld. And you see a lot of that as elements with regards to the OCP corporates, like the lives that they live compared to the have-nots. So I think is probably the best term for it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the people that populate this cast are just very entertaining to watch. I mean, you've got
a great cast.
Kurtwood Smith playing Clarence Bodico.
Oh my God, one of the most quotable villains in the history of cinema.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There's some. I mean, I've seen him in other stuff since then. For instance, in that comedy, that '70s show,
Which is comedies.
Yeah, but he still has a sinister edge to him, even when I see him doing comedy, because this movie left an impression on me. I mean, he is just so evil in this, and he does it so well.
Yeah.
And all the characters in this shine in some fashion or other. Others that I feel may have been initially not pushed to one side, but maybe not given as much credit as they deserve as well. How, like Anne Lewis, played by...
I don't know about that. I think Nancy Allen is absolutely brilliant in this.
Absolutely.
I'm a big fan of her in this film. Oh my God. Like, I don't want to hear on this podcast, I don't want to hear anywhere near it. There never were strong female characters in film, because like she kicks ass.
She's one of the strongest.
Oh my God. And like there's so many elements to her character. Like, she's mischievous, she's naughty, she's not a stickler for the rules, and she chews gum and kicks ass, as I said a second ago, but then at the same time she's kind and caring, as a woman, as the archetype, the gender archetype suggests. She's both. She's got short hair, she's been, let's say, defeminized somewhat with her appearance, but she's still got those piercing blue eyes. But then at the same time, she also becomes something of a mentoring mother-like figure to Robocop. When, to go further into the story, he starts to regain his humanity, and she starts to guide him towards that humanity, doesn't she?
Yeah.
I think is poignant, because obviously they were partners, but not friends.
No, there was still that professionalism between them.
Well, they didn't know each other long enough. It was the first day, wasn't it?
That's a valid point.
So it's not exactly like they've got some great deep connection, is it?
It's just that she feels that she failed him initially because he died whilst on his first patrol with her.
But I'm not sure if it's that. I mean, this, you could interpret that. I feel like it's just her natural instincts to want to pull the humanity out of the machine and then to nurture it.
No, we all remember that scene of her looking into the visor and goes, "Murphy, is that you?"
And so iconic, so iconic. And obviously shooting the helping him, shoot the baby food later on, and she,
Yeah. I mean, she's an actress that should be mentioned in the same breath as Sigourney Weaver and Linda Hamilton.
I would say that she had less success than both of them overall.
Yeah.
I mean, she was more in like teen flicks, if I remember correctly, before Robocop, which made the casting of her kind of interesting. I can't remember the name of the films. Dressed to Kill, that's it.
She was renowned as a teen sort of like sensation, so to speak. And to go from that to a movie like this, wherein she said, I believe her father was a police officer, and
she's in Carrie, of course. Carrie. She plays the nasty girl that bullies her. Oh wow! There you go. That says it all.
As I say, she has got an edge to her then as well. Then, I mean, as a parent, I remember that now from Carrie. Carrie was a brutal movie.
Yes, great book as well.
Yeah. But to this end, I mean, this is a cast where everyone pulls their weight. everyone is not. Some characters are chewing the scenery, and you want to watch them chew the scenery.
Oh God, they chew
Like
the
every
scenery
time
all
you
right.
have Boddicker on screen monologuing and just espousing to his gang about all
This,
sorts of
I feel like the writers of this movie, the casting directors, they just thought so deeply about all of these characters. Like, for example, the henchman. You know, Emil, we killed you. We killed you. Like he's the one that obviously ends up dying the most horrifically at the end. Also, Ray Wise, who plays Leon, who's from Twin Peaks, and also you've got Miguel Ferrer from Twin Peaks as well. And then there's I can't remember his name. Is it Johnson, the one with the great laugh?
I know the laugh and everything. I can't remember the name, but yeah.
Yeah. He's hilarious, absolutely hilarious. He's like, oh, what does he say to Nancy? Don't you want me to zip this up? And even the guy, the SWAT team member who's involved in the action sequence where Robocop goes in and rescues that guy from that building, like
I
even
punches
he's
through the wall.
yeah, that's right. Even he's memorable. Lieutenant Hedgecock, that's it. Even he's memorable. So many memorable characters. So many. The old man.
And all of this is held together by the character at the center of this story, which is Peter Weller's Alex Murphy, who almost didn't end up playing this role. There were so many considerations for this role. I mean, this movie, on multiple levels, almost wasn't made for all sorts of reasons. I mean, Verhoeven himself passed on it twice. It was his wife that actually turned around to him and go, no, this is your satire. You're not seeing it.
Yes.
Because it's easy to write off a story of Robocop in Law Enforcement of the Future, which was one of the original titles for this, as being just a schlocky 80s B movie about a man who's an officer who gets killed and gets resurrected as a robot. I mean, that does on paper sound very almost bland. But this movie, like with the introduction of the news segments and the world building they put into it, and also the fact that these actors all care about this, and then you can see that they care about it, they are trying so hard, creates a really interesting world. I mean, those adverts they used to show halfway through the movies, they were hilarious.
I think the world building has always been what's made the film feel so dense. As a youngster watching this film, I'm not sure if I completely understood the satire, when I was 7 or 8 or 9.
Oh, well, the throwaway lines in the news reports where they're just going,
Yes.
in other news, there's been blah, blah, blah. Then they kind of flick onto the main point that's addressing regarding Robocop. And when you're a kid, you gloss over it. But when you're an adult, you hear it.
I'm not. Well, this is what I'm saying to you. I never glossed over any of it. I just feel like it built the world in my head. I just didn't know that it was doing that. The world of Robocop has always felt so rich, so dense, so detailed. While it is a future interpretation, a mirrored version of our world, a cyberpunk world, you could say.
Yeah.
Regardless of how far-fetched the science is, the depth of the world building and how it is presented, because it's not just exposition in a novel with a character that's talking. It's not a text crawl to tell you about it. It's all presented in narrative form, isn't it? It's presented visually for you to watch, but with the biting sardonic humor. It just makes it all more believable. All the more, it's so much easier to be invested in this world because of it all. It all sort of adds. Like, Robocop is an incredibly detailed movie overall, not just with its symbolism and its themes, but like was exactly what you're saying now, the world building aspects, the news reports, not just the actual news reports, but the content of the news reports, the suggestions that OCP are involved in more than they are, the state of the world. It's like what is post Cold War, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it's got a sinister edge to it. And
exactly. There's just so much to it, so much to get your teeth into. You can rewatch this movie multiple times and pick out more and more and more.
Yeah, there was always something I liked about this movie. I mean, even the random that I'll buy that for $1 guy.
Yeah.
With people constantly referencing that catchphrase, like people do these days, where if there's a comedy segment that's kind of blown up and everyone likes to quote it, it's a little touch like that it's hard to explain why that works, but it just does. It makes sense to me.
It's like a dig at the 80s corporate commercialism, isn't it? How everything's so money focused.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is coming out of the 80s wherein there were movies like Wall Street coming out which showed the obsession of capitalism and with the American dream of getting rich. And you can see that a lot in this movie. That there are people that have made it, some people that are still hoping to make it, and some people that have accepted they won't make it. But to others, it isn't about making money. Like for Alex Murphy, he is just happy with his family.
That's right. He's a family man. He's an everyman.
Yeah,
You know, even that sequence when he talks about the TV show TJ Laser, isn't it? It emphasizes the importance of family to him and how it humanizes him, because he's talking about how he learned as a cop a simple, gun rotating trick so his son could see that his dad can do the same trick that his favorite superhero does. That's great.
And that says more about the relationship between the two of them than other saying that, my son sees me as his hero sort of thing. By saying that,
that's exactly it. That one bit of dialogue says enough about Murphy as a character as much than an entire 2-3 minute scene of showing him, with his family. It immediately tells you this kind of person he is. That's what the script is just so smart, so clever, so well thought out. Everything, every character has their motive. Every character has their characterization. Every setup has a payoff. Oh, do they even make movies like this anymore? Oh.
Well, I suppose when they're rebooting this one. So.
Again.
Yeah.
Well, that's for another episode.
Yeah, that's a conversation for later. Yeah. But as I say, Peter Weller is an immensely interesting main character for a story surrounded by interesting characters. And I will be honest, I feel there were talks of other people playing this role. Mm-hmm. Some who I would have been intrigued to see, I will be honest. I mean, I know that Rutger Hauer was in the running at one point. Mm-hmm. And I would have been interested to see his take on this. He's got a certain charm to him in his own right. He's very charismatic.
I can't see anyone else though. It's the voice. It's not just obviously the incredible effort that he went to be a mime artist effectively as this character, but Peter Weller has got a very brassy toned voice in the first place, very deep, almost metallic.
It almost belies the sort of like the face that it's coming from. The voice is
yeah.
I mean, another person who's in consideration was Schwarzenegger himself.
No.
And I feel that would have taken something away from him. I mean, I don't like to knock Schwarzenegger. He's a fantastic actor. Though this is more of a character role, whilst he is very much... Some of his best roles, he had very minimal lines in. For instance, I think Terminator itself, he only had 17 lines in the entire movie.
Yeah, he's very good in Total Recall, though.
Yeah, I will be honest. That was his first foray into a bit more. Of a
he's actually very good. He's actually really good in that film, and he's good in what film is it? Oh, The Last Action Hero. Really underrated in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that.
Really,
movie.
really underrated movie. Big.
That's mainly because it required him to sort of tear the chronic shit out of himself in places.
Exactly, parodying himself was fantastic.
Yes, and credit's due. He did, and he totally owned it.
I can't believe was he really eyed up for this role?
Yeah,
because it was this film that made him because he got Verhoeven to make Total Recall. He chose Verhoeven as the director of Total Recall based on Robocop.
Yeah, I mean, I think the name was thrown about at one point, but then once they saw Weller in the outfit, they realised that if they were to actually do Schwarzenegger up in a similar outfit, he'd look like the Michelin Man.
Yes, no.
I mean, the fact is, Weller is not. He's not buff. He's not sort of like swole.
He's a small man, really.
And once you've got that suit of armor on him, he does become a walking tank. and that is one thing I do love about this movie is his mannerisms, his movement.
Yeah,
there is some. I mean, you talked about him doing the mime training, and I do remember hearing stories of the fact that they actually changed the outfit on the first day of filming without letting him know, and it actually reduced him to tears. There was actually a really when the director was describing the story, he says it was one of his biggest regrets when making his movies. He didn't appreciate how important it was to Weller that he'd spent months training his body to move in a certain fashion, specifically because the armor, the actual suit was very unwieldy. It was very heavy, and he'd learnt to move his hips, his body, his head in a certain manner to convey that. And then for him to turn up on the first day and be told, actually, the suit's been changed. You need to start doing the same thing, but in this suit instead. And it reduced him to tears.
Yeah.
Because of the sheer frustration with the situation, the director not understanding how significant a thing he was asking of him. And the director said later, I realized how out of order I was, how out of line I was to do something like that to such a professional actor. So, nonetheless, he still nails it. I mean, there's just the small sequences, like when you're just watching him walk through the police precinct, making his way down corridors. It's almost hypnotic, just the way he moves. You're not sure where he's going, you're not sure what he's doing, but you know he's going with intent. The way that his head always turns first to lead the rest of the body. And it's one of those things that stayed with me from this movie. But a minor thing that stayed with me that I always loved. Now, this movie itself is, I suppose, the closest analogy you could say that this is a resurrection story. This is a story of a man who falls but gets back up. And I feel that a lot of people make comparisons to this to what could arguably be the greatest resurrection story, which is, of course, Optimus Prime. No, I'm kidding. It's Jesus. That's the idea of a man who died and rose again. And maybe you could say they're reaching on this one. Maybe it is a bit too on the nose. However, there is one specific sequence where you do see Robocop walk on water. Towards the end. It's a very shallow pool, but nonetheless it gives the illusion of him walking on water. And someone actually brought this up to Verhoeven in later years and said, was that intentional? Now, the thing about Verhoeven is that obviously he's going to turn around and go, yeah, I absolutely was going for that sort of angle. But you can never tell with him. You get the impression he's got a little bit of a sense of humour to him. So
he's got a twinkle in his eye, hasn't he, that man? All of his interviews, he comes across as very passionate. Yeah.
He takes great joy in his work.
Yeah.
I mean, all of his movies have always got their tongue firmly lodged in their cheek. And it's one thing that I love about all of them. They do have an element of comedy to them. And it is something that is important to me for a lot of the stories I read. I mean, I very much come from a comedy background in terms of the stories that I read. And this appeals to me on every level, whether it be the violence, whether it be the comedy, whether it be the human interest story. I think that they're all A+. That's why I feel this movie works on so many different levels for people. Because everyone can take their own thing from this story.
Yes.
So, as I say, with Robocop, it has spawned multiple movies. And for the most part, they are still watchable, some more so than others.
Okay, well, let me put something to you then, because there's something about this movie that has always been really important to me. And that's the soundtrack by Buzz Poldurus.
Oh, it's iconic theme there.
Yes. Just absolutely iconic. Just what else can you say about it? One of the greatest themes in the history of cinema, you know. But there's something really interesting about the underlying effects of Buzz Poldurus' score. And that's the use of electronic and strings. You know, he uses electronic music, synthesizers, kind of like in the same way that Jerry Goldsmith would do, to underline, to score, as the kind of phrase, the mechanical nature of the character. But at the same time, there's that rousing, string-based theme
with the horns.
That really, it's heroic, isn't it? It's heroic. It's shouting to the world, and I should also bring attention to probably the most important piece of music in this film, and probably the most poignant sequence in the film, and it's become inspirational to me over the years. It's when Robocop, as he starts to regain his humanity, he starts to remember his past life, and then he goes back and visits his home.
Oh, that sequence where he walks through his home with the memories playing out.
But the home has been abandoned and it's for sale. And all the way through it on the TV screens, you've got the man, the estate agent, talking about how wonderful the place is. And as he's walking through it, it's a very, very low, very somber, melancholic theme with slow rising horns, but the surge of synthesizers is there as well as he's going through it. It makes it not sad. It's melancholic and affecting.
Ambivalent. The mixture
Yeah,
of
it's so
homecoming, but
complex.
not.
I can't really explain it, to be honest. That's how powerful it is. And the music becomes more intense as he remembers more and more and more and more and more and more. And then the Robocop theme starts to repeat and build into this somber tones until he becomes angry and starts to reacquire his humanity, and ends with him punching the TV screen. Then the theme hits again, doesn't it? You know, and that is
Well, this is a man that's at war with himself.
yes.
He has the robotic side of him, which has protocols. It has the 4 rules that he has to
Yes.
follow, and whilst he's got his humanity, saying, "No, I'm still a father, goddammit, and I want to see my family."
Yes.
And
Well, I'm not sure. It's interpretable, isn't it? Because it's not until in the later films that you start to see Murphy / Robocop wanting to be, the Murphy of the past. But I think that the purpose of this scene and the purpose of this character arc is, aside from the thematic nature of humanity that the film is focusing on, it adds more it adds more stakes, it adds more power to his mission, because
he's more than an automaton who's just
no, because the enemy in this film is OCP. The enemy in this film is the corporate side, because aside from Robocop, aside from Clarence Boddicker, there's this other thing happening, isn't there? You've got police officers, and the police have been bought and privatized by a corporation, which is where this argument comes from, where the police are striking, aren't they? Because of how poorly they're being treated, how they're not being paid enough, how there's not enough of them working. There's that argument with the police chief, says we're police officers and police officers don't strike. But then at the same time, it's revealed in the story that, if you remember this, Bob Mortimer. Is it Bob? Yeah, Bob Mortimer. Bob Mortimer.
Bob
Is it
Morton.
Bob Mortimer? It's Bob Mortimer. Bob Mortimer. Oh dear. Oh dear. Bob Mortimer, Miguel Ferrer's character, the actual creator of Robocop, he mentions that they have several candidates in line for the Robocop program.
They have several different types of people
that
they're
are
considering.
already working for them, who, if they die, will be turned into Robocop. It's not like Alex Murphy is killed and they go, "Oh, finally, someone's died. Let's do the experiment." No.
They've page marked several people, all of which are saying if any one of these people croaks, we'll be all over that.
Is it any wonder as well that he reveals that he's transferred from a safer place? They even comment on the fact
that he was specifically looking for a violent. I mean, Detroit in and of itself today is considered to be a very violent society.
Well, this is what he said, is that he says where he's from, can't remember exactly where it is, and it's implied that where he is from is much safer than Detroit. So perhaps he was plucked from the previous police station, whatever, because he was viewed as being ill-prepared, let's say, because he is ill-prepared. Because part of the reason why he dies is because he goes in on his own. He doesn't wait for backup. He makes mistakes. He's not prepared for how brutal and violent these criminals are.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying to you is that there's not just the villain is not just like Clarence Boddicker. The villain is also the corporate entity that is in charge of this whole situation, that is influencing this situation, which is why I'm saying to you that this all adds together to add more potency to Robocop's journey, I mean, in the end, he could kill Clarence Boddicker, and then that's it. He killed the guy that got him. Then he could go back to work. But Clarence Boddicker says to him, "I work for Dick Jones."
Yeah,
Dick Jones owns the cops.
Yeah.
He reveals that actually OCP are more or less behind it all in the first place. So
Well, that leads to that unsettling moment where one of his protocols is to reveal that he can't act upon any employee of
that's right.
OCP.
That's when he goes to arrest Dick Jones, isn't it?
Which in and of itself is still a very... So that's a point that never gets addressed too much in this movie, but the fact of the matter is that the employees of OCP are beyond the reach of this person of the law.
You're our product, says
Yeah.
Dick Jones. You're our product.
Yeah. And that in itself is a very sort of like, it's horrifying. But
I tell you, when I was a kid, right, and I first watched it, I can remember like not understanding the sequence when he goes to arrest Dick Jones. I remember saying to my dad, "What's wrong with Robocop? Is there like a force field or something?" I didn't understand that it was like his own, computer systems working against him and shutting down because he was breaking his hidden rule that he could not see. Directive 4. What a great idea! What a great idea! Because that setup. Because earlier on in the film, when he's reborn, we see the world through his HUD, don't we? And it's
when he gets screwed into place and the grid comes down.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Bob Morton, his creator, says to him, "What are your directives?" And he says, "Serve the public trust, protect the innocent, uphold the law." Directive 1, Directive 2, Directive 3. Directive 4 comes up.
Question
classified.
marks. Yeah, that's
Yes.
it.
So it's setting it up. And then we get the sequence where obviously Directive 4 is not enacted. It is enacted in his own systems. And then we get the ultimate payoff at the end, isn't it? With Dick, you're fired. Thank you. Bang. The sequence at the end of the movie when Dick Jones turns on his superior, the old man, and threatens to kill him because Robocop can't kill him. And so he is then fired by his hostage and then killed. And it's just so smart. It's so fucking smart, man. Like, it's gold. Absolute gold. Just so well written, so well thought out, all the way through. And then there's the iconic, what's your name, son? Son. He calls him son as well.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you call him son. It is like a face on, a toaster.
Yeah, because at this point he is like he's helmetless. He's got his full face exposed, and let's just take a moment to say how horrifying that image is. I mean, the makeup is brilliant in terms of the way it looks like his skin has been stretched around a metal shell of a skull with the clear brain case. But that's one of the first times in this movie where he smiles and looks back at him and says, "Murphy, sir."
It just says Murphy, doesn't it? Murphy.
Yeah, Murphy.
And you get the credits. Well, it's been building up, hasn't it, at that point? Because he, after the iconic drug bust, where he like kills so many people. My God, it's so good. Then obviously goes to has the fight with Ed 209 after trying to arrest Dick Jones. He's mortally wounded, isn't he? And then he has the really poignant scenes with Lewis.
Yeah, where she helps him operating on himself.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that, is it a stylistic choice? Is it a narrative choice? Or was it accidental that all the way through the film, Peter Weller's baritone voice has got like a robotic effect on it, hasn't it? And then when he takes the helmet off, the robotic effect is gone. He's talking with a completely human, normal voice. It's almost like at this moment, he's free.
Yeah, you can look him in the eye.
He's free from Robocop. He's free. He's no longer Robocop. He's Murphy. Because this film is, as you put earlier on, it's about resurrections. It's not just about the resurrection of Alex Murphy into Robocop, but also the resurrection of Alex Murphy from Robocop, becoming the human being again, finding his humanity, which is, for me personally, always been the core theme of this film. It is Robocop as a product, let's say, is a machine with human insights and a human brain, and that human brain is connected to a multitude of systems. And these systems that power his strength and his ability to shoot and whatever, his communication, whatever, is dictated by the directives that control him. And it's that moment when he breaks free, isn't it, of it's part of the time, part of the process of him breaking free from that command-based character. While he still does have the directives because he's a product and whatnot, hence the fact Dick Jones has to get fired. It's about the humanity, it's about him finding his voice again, finding the human inside him again, and that's why I think his voice changes. I mean, there's that great sequence where he obviously takes the helmet off, and Lewis holds the mirror up, and she asks him about his family, and he says, "I can feel them, but I can't remember them." I mean, how powerful is that?
It's like you understand, and yet
it says so much with so little.
Yes, this is it. I mean, if you could try and build on that, but he says enough just in that lines.
It's perfect. It's perfect dialogue. If you dissect it for a second and ask yourself what he is saying, he's saying that as Robocop, my memory was wiped.
But there is a shape of them in back. It's still in there.
But but my humanity, the connection that humans build with other humans. I don't want to say souls because I don't know if I believe in the human soul, but I do believe that through the very chemicals that form us, emotional attachment is a physical thing.
Yes.
And we feel it, we detect it. It's almost like when you can sense when your partner's sad, or sense when they enter the room or something like that. And that's what that's talking about, is that he can feel his family, even though he is literally a face on a toaster. It's so powerful. All this kind of stuff I never got when I was a kid. When I was a kid and I first watched it, I just saw a great hyper-violent, because that's all we cared about in the 80s when we were
absolutely. We're just waiting for the next action sequence.
We didn't care about that. The great rousing score, the incredible costume, and let's just take a second to talk about how fucking iconic that costume is, how
the hip holster, the way in which it flicks open was the coolest.
Everything.
The way in which he used to walk into gun battles, the way he used to throw out his other arm in order to counterbalance him rotating and things like that. But if anyone else did that in an action movie, if you had Arnie doing that without the Robocop, he'd look silly. But it works so well with this character. Just motions, the movements, and everything.
You've got to thank Peter Weller's efforts there for the physical acting.
Yes, it's absolutely nailed it. It's just genuinely unbelievable at times how well he fell into the role, to the point where he doesn't disappear into it, but he becomes another person in it.
Well, if you look into, as you mentioned, like the costume being changed, he went through hell to get ready for the original costume, and then had to go through hell again.
Relearning the motions.
It's well documented how much effort he put into this.
Yeah.
But the production design is just, incredible. I want to say it's Phil Tippett, who's like a really big name, who did tons and tons and tons of stuff, and, like the practical effects, even now kind of look good. Even Ed 209 doesn't look awful.
I mean, they went with the stop motion with, there is something almost comical about the way of watching Robocop scamper down the stairs as the Ed 209 pauses for a moment and looks down at him and then absolutely stacks it on the way down. And then follow-ups of Murphy being driven backwards through like concrete walls and things, and it's that's the point of where it's becoming almost like Tom and Jerry levels of comedy violence, but at the same time it's still immensely entertaining. So.
Go back to the sequence when Ed 209 has the arresting test.
Oh, that's hilarious. Put down the firearm.
It's not like Ed 209 just like caps a bullet in his head. He unloads like in how many bullets? Literally, how many bullets? This is like Blaine in Predator levels of chain gunning the rainforest levels, searching for the predator, but all aimed to one man who held a gun as a test. And all the while, like the scientists are worrying and like not worrying, but trying to.
Well, that moment that he actually repeats, "Put down the weapon," and he's just like he's put it down. You're like, oh, I see where this is going. But the sheer amount of violence that follows it, you're not expecting. You are, as you
Yeah.
say, you expect him just to get shot and it'd be like, oh god, he got killed. But no, this
No,
goes through that and comes out the other side, and
he
and
like falls onto the
the model,
model, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah, and his blood everywhere. Oh, it's insane.
yes,
But then you
and
could say the same thing about when Murphy's killed. It is like so
it's such a
violent
it's
and
so
over the
graphically
top.
violent, but at the same that one it becomes more horrendous the further it goes.
Well, let's talk about like the penchant for violence in this, right? Because you know the first they like. Does someone shoot him or punch him first and stun him, and he's on his knees, and then Clarence Bollicker knocks him to the ground, points the gun at him, and starts making a weird noise like he's playing a game. Goes, "Nee, nee, 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 nee," like he's
Yeah,
aiming.
then he
Like
goes for the hand first, doesn't he?
that's right. I mean, like he's making light of what is. They're effectively
Well,
torturing him.
it's a game to him.
Yeah,
Essentially, you're right. It's like because in his mind, he's just another cop, and cops are expendable.
that's right. That's right. Cops don't like me, so I don't like cops. Ugh. He has got to be like just one of the greatest villains ever. Just unbelievable. You wouldn't want to
Yes.
meet him. You wouldn't want to get on his wrong side. But watching him from afar in a film, he's absolutely hilarious.
No,
But
it
for
could
the
have
wrong
just been
reason.
just a two-dimensional henchman to the corporate higher-ups, but he made it his own. He was intimidating and sinister in his own way. It's just he's not an especially imposing man, but he creates an aura of just malevolence
That's
every
right.
time
But
he's on the
also
screen.
by intelligence as well. He's
Yes,
in
he's
charge of.
cold and cunning. Yeah,
Yes, he is much like the suits in OCP, just making money. But he's doing it through nefarious
yep.
underground illegal means. Is he
No,
any different from the suits in OCP?
no,
You know,
he's
not
risen
at
to
all.
the top in his respective circles,
Yeah,
and they are just as cutthroat. And
that's right. That's right. Well, look at what happens. When the Ed 209 experiment goes wrong, Bob Morton even though that guy has just been shot to death, is immediately. Oh, by the way, Ed 209 might have gone wrong. I've got the Robocop project, and it's like, dude. And then, it works. It goes on. Robocop's built, and then what's his name? Ronnie Cox's character, Dick Jones,
yeah,
has him killed. This is like corporate subterfuge. It's
yeah,
just for money. You
just
know,
because higher up doesn't mean the same sort of deals take place. Yeah,
there really is very little difference between the corporate backstabbing and the street level backstabbing over drugs.
yeah.
And in the middle of it is a man who learned a trick with a gun so that his son thought he was a good cop. Who just got transferred on the wrong day. Just by accident. It's a tragedy, really. Poor old Murphy.
This is it. I mean, that's the part of that makes this story so heartbreaking. Is even though he does reconnect with his humanity, he is forever changed.
Mhm.
There's no coming back. I mean, whilst he may understand that he will always have this detachment from his family, no matter how much he remembers how much he loves them.
I mean,
And that's
obviously, the sequel touches on that, doesn't it? A little bit. But in this film, it is. I don't know. It's not the focus of the film. What kind of relationship he can have with his family is not what this film is interested in. It's more interested in the fact that he regains his
he
humanity.
coming to terms with this new version of himself.
Just finding his humanity. I don't think
Yeah.
it's about him coming to terms with it at all. I think it's just about the humanity. It's more about the thematic symbolism. I mean, perhaps we'll discuss the second film at another time, but it sort of retcons all the progress he
They
made.
roll it back a little bit, don't they? I mean,
Yeah, they do.
that
Yeah.
final sort of glimmer in his eye when he looks back at Dick Jones and says Murphy. That's kind of like rolled back a little bit by comparison to going into the second movie. He's reverted a bit more to his more machine level sort of like.
Yeah. So, but then we also get the sequences of his family. So, like, it is attempting to explore those themes a bit further. Well, I want to say further because, like I said, this film is not interested in those themes. The themes of family are more of a catalyst. It's the memory of his family that
brings his humanity back.
contributes to the humanity in the first
Yeah.
place. It's more about the actual humanity inside him,
Yes.
than it is the fact that he is connecting with his family or trying to understand who he is and blah 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 blah. In the end, that simple line when he says, "Murphy, I'm Murphy," that says everything you need to say. Again, with just a simple line of dialogue. He knows who he is, even though what is left of Murphy is minor in comparison. This is not Ray Skywalker talking, This is he's not just assuming, a lineage because he decides to. He's
recovering himself.
Yes, that's right. He's making a statement. He's that
Yes.
I am the person that I was before because I remember who I was, and
This is a concept that's been used in cinema multiple times.
Yes.
In terms of the loss of self and the recapturing of it, whether it be Ghost in the Shell, whether it be Lawnmower Man, or whether it be Appleseed, like all these sort of stories of a person who undergoes a transformation but is desperately trying to retain what makes them human, often usually involving some form of technology.
It's it's been done with like mental health as well, and
I can see that, yeah,
and journeys as well. I can't think of any films off the top of my head right now, but if I sat down and thought about it, I probably could. But it's a common trope, It's another, one of the Hero of Thousand Faces arcs,
But I feel this is one of the best examples of this specific type of trope.
It is, yeah. Let's say Robocop is not just the sum of it, more than the sum of its parts, because the sum of its parts makes there's just so much to it. There's so much to unpack, so much to mine. You can, as I said, I watched it as a kid, and I just saw it as an awesome, gory action movie about a Robocop hero, a robots cop, let's say, with an amazing soundtrack, and that's it. But then as I got older, I rewatched it, and also it was a bit funny, obviously. I got the humor as well, a little bit, not the satire, because that's another thing that the film's needs to stop transgressing. But the satire is so biting in this film because it's done with such a straight face. That is the key to great satire. It presents absolutely ridiculous ideas that are so
they play painfully straight. Yes,
that it makes it funny.
Yeah, to the point where it almost takes you a second to realise the absurdity of the situation.
Absolutely,
absurdity
is the key word. Yeah, absurdity is the key word here. Absolutely. So, for my money, mate, and we might be, I might be using this phrase a lot as we roll out this series of 80s movie discussions. I would say that this is a perfect movie. It is flawless.
I would strongly agree. I mean, I feel that whilst there are other movies because we're going to cover several movies in this run of 80s action, and some of them do certain aspects better than this movie. However, this movie gets the balance. Oh no, I'd say that in terms of the technological side of things, I feel that Terminator.
What do you mean technological?
In terms of like the robots and the
special effects.
Yeah, that sort of element, I feel may be better, and I feel maybe the terror that comes with technology and everything that's played up more in the likes of Terminator. However, I feel because the likes of the comedy and the social world building and everything, this movie is much more balanced than some of the other movies.
And the humanity in it as well.
Yes, I mean this is one of the big four as far as I'm concerned. I think I've alluded to this too in the past in the pod, wherein we have Terminator, we have Alien, and we have Predator. Those are those are the big four of the 80s action movies, in my mind, anyway.
Actually, movies in general, to be honest with you, in the 80s, that's the.
I mean, there were other movies in the 80s. I'm not taking anything away from the others. I hear there were a couple. I mean, there are other greats from that era, whether you're talking about Blade Runner or whether you're talking about Batman and all that. But these four were solid, like, action movies.
Well, here's the thing. I wouldn't say Blade Runner is a perfect movie, even though Blade Runner is a 10 out of 10 movie for me, personally. I wouldn't say it's a perfect movie. I think it is flawed because of the nature of its troubled production and the rewriting and the changing. Maybe if we get to the director's cut, the final director's cut, we can possibly say it's a perfect movie, but a perfect movie requires perfect pacing. and I would say Blade Runner is slow. And I like a
Yes.
slow movie. Big time. But I'm talking purely from an objective point of view here. Whereas Robocop is expertly paced.
It's balanced perfectly. You're absolutely right.
You know, like I said earlier, the dialogue is so well thought out. So well thought out.
Every scene is entertaining in some fashion or another, whether it be
Every
action,
scene has a reason. Every scene has a purpose. Every scene leads into the next. But also, like the news segments, also act as a bit of a palate cleanser, which I think works quite effectively as well. You know, it's a counterpoint to the horrific violence. If you're not detecting the sly humor in the horrific violence in the actual scenes, the contrast in the absurdity of the newsreels may well clue you into what this film is really about, and it is having a bit of a joke at the expense of other 80s action movies, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Like Judge Dredd, you know, the absolute lawman. Even the mask is similar. It's very clear there was inspiration.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, it was only visible with the chin and everything. It's just
the eyeless executioner of crime.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, this is a 10 out of 10 movie for me. It's one of the greatest movies of all time. Infinitely rewatchable.
Yep, strongly agree with you on that one. It is very much one of my favourites as well.
So, you got anything else to say, man?
No, I think we more or less covered it on that one, really.
I did enjoy that. I love talking about this. I probably could keep going, but we need to keep this podcast on the wraps.
I will be honest,
really.
we were trying to keep it succinct. I mean, there's so many things that we could go into. We could start talking about the sequels, as I say, and go into all the depth and the ups and downs that come with those later movies.
If we did that, though, then we wouldn't have an excuse to do a separate podcast about Terminator 2. I don't want to talk about Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 in the same podcast.
That's true. Maybe we could do a sequel to this of sequels from do a Robocop 2 and a Terminator 2, which I feel would.
Well, we could go, or we'll do decades. I think maybe we'll do decades.
Decades would work. Yes.
Yeah, because we're doing 80s and we're doing 90s. Anyway.
Yes.
Well, cool. Anyway, yeah. So we're gonna jump into a break on that segment, and we're gonna be right back with a look at the Terminator.
Catch you in a bit.
In a minute. Welcome back to the podcast. We are about to delve into the classic 80s movie, The Terminator. This one was devised and directed by James Cameron after a fever dream, depicting a metallic skeleton rising from an explosion and chasing him down. He co-wrote the story with his friend Bill Wisher, who would also work on Terminator 2, and, ironically, the first cinematic adaptation of Judge Dredd. After poor experiences with his previous films, such as, the previous film, Piranha 2, Cameron wanted more creative control, including that over the casting. This is a film that cleverly combines elements from the slasher genre, science fiction, and also preys upon the fears of 1980s America, including nuclear war, surveillance, and the rise of computer technology. I find it quite interesting that recognizing that it is at its core a slasher movie, it bears many hallmarks with John Carpenter, even down to the the final girl, as the part is now often called in such films, and the synthesized soundtrack. What is interesting is that Cameron intended there to actually be two Terminators to be sent back in time, and that one of them was going to be liquid metal, but he deemed that special effects technology at the time was inadequate. Did you know that, Mark?
I didn't know.
No. What he intended to be Terminator 2 was supposed to be Terminator 1.
I mean, knew he was onto a good idea. That's where I went back to it later, I imagine.
Another interesting factoid about this one, though, is that the budget. I mean, what do you think the budget was?
I've always been terrible at predicting budgets when it comes to movies.
Well, I'll tell you now, it was low budget. It was 6.4 million.
Damn, I mean, I'm not exactly well versed in Hollywood, but I know that's low.
That's low. I mean, you think about today, like
it's the year of the $100 million movie, isn't it?
I mean, this one, I'm pretty sure It was viewed as a low budget movie at the time of release, but you know, I'm actually going to have a very, very quick look. I should have done this earlier on how much this made. So let's have a look. 6.4 million budget, an opening weekend of 4 million, domestic American gross 38 million.
I imagine the VHS sales were the things that really bolstered it up, though.
And the worldwide, this is all box office. We're not even
Yeah.
on that. And the box office, the worldwide box office. So the actual overall box office of this film was over $100,000. This is like 1984 money, for God's sake.
This is one thing I've learned about budgets and box offices recently: is whilst a movie's budget will be declared, that's not the full amount of money that goes into the movie. There's actually, you can say that the advertising and everything is considered separate to the budget of the movie, and that is often double the amount.
Yes.
So even when movies are apparently breaking even, they would still be considered a loss by the studio. But by no means was this a loss. This is like one of the greatest sort of classic sci-fi horrors of all time.
Well, it certainly made its money back.
Certainly.
Did you also know that Lance Henriksen was originally supposed to play the Terminator?
I'm visualizing it now. I mean, Lance Henriksen's an interesting guy, but it's too iconically Arnie, isn't it?
At this point, obviously, yeah. It's really interesting, actually, how it came about. Orion Pictures wanted a bankable star to play Kyle Reese. And some of the actors that were considered include Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, even O.J. Simpson. Apparently, Cameron was not keen on the idea of O.J. Simpson because he did not think he had the look of a killer. And when Cameron initially met with Arnold Schwarzenegger about the role, it was the role of Kyle Reese, and that he liked him so much that he cast him as the Terminator. So, how interesting is that? Michael Biehn would, be cast as Kyle and become, a Cameron stalwart. He has his stalwarts, doesn't he? His actors that he reuses over and over again.
Yeah.
So yes, a bit of historical context there on the beginnings of this film. What about our own cultural context, Mark? Can you remember when you first watched this movie?
Yes, I can. I was a young boy when I watched this. I say young. I was about 13 or 14, I believe, at the time. And I watched it because my mum put it on.
Oh, right.
Yeah, like it was one of those movies where you'd always heard of the Terminator. You knew loosely what it was due to the fact that it seeped into the cultural memory. Everyone was aware of the Terminator. They were aware of I Will Be Back and all that kind of stuff. And then one day, me and Mum were in the front room and she goes, "Do you fancy watching this movie, The Terminator? I mean, I've heard loads of people talk about it. We could always watch it." And we started watching it. And around about
wait a second. Had your mother seen it before at this point?
No.
Oh.
So the both of us watched it, and for the majority of the movie was spent her kind of looking over at me and going, "I shouldn't be showing this to you." But she didn't turn it off. We carried on watching it because we were both invested. And there is something. I mean, it's at first she started to make like allusions to the likes of like the Freddy Kruegers and the Michael Myers in terms of the fact that it does have that slasher vibe to it. But the science fiction story was just so intriguing to me that I told Mum, "No, Mum, let's keep going. This is a good story." It's the kind of thing that I loved in my fiction at the time when at that age. I was very much into my science fiction, and this was just more grown-up science fiction than anything I'd ever consumed before, or like Star Trek Next Generation and so on and so forth.
I'm not too sure how old I was when I saw it. It was definitely after my parents divorced. So I was probably 9 or 10. And it was in the house of my mum's current boyfriend. And I remember, like, for some reason, he had, like, a double living room. He had a living room that he was allowed to use. And then there was a second sort of living room where his two sons were allowed to use. And they had Sky there. And Sky, to me, was, like, the most incredible thing. I mean, what age did you have Sky? Can you remember?
Oh, I had it young. I mean, my dad actually worked for one of the cable companies back in the day.
Oh, right.
And he actually got given the box as part of the perks of the job. Although that was the days when cable or Sky
Mhm.
was only about 18 channels.
Mhm.
And
Still more than terrestrial when we had 4.
absolutely. Yeah, those were the days of like TNT and the like, and it used to be a movie channel and everything that was. Back in the day, that blew my mind. The idea of a channel that plays nothing but movies constantly.
The movie channel.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It was, yeah.
But yeah, for me, it was like an exciting concept of watching movies on TV or having a channel dedicated to movies, let's say. With terrestrial TV, 25, 30 years ago, you'd have to get the TV guide out, go to the film section, physical paper, by the way, obviously, and like read through a list of films. Everyone circle the ones you want to watch or something and record them, maybe. But like, it was a novelty, to say the least, of to sit and watch Sky movies around someone's house. And I mean, my father showed us horror movies from a very young age. I think I've discussed that already in the past. We were no strangers to such things, but for some reason, the Terminator, I think, slipped us by. This must have been before Terminator 2 came out. I'm not 100% sure, because Terminator 2 was, 91? Maybe it was around there. I'm not too sure. I wouldn't have seen Terminator 2 at the cinema, that's for sure, because I would have been too young. And yes, it was exciting to, my parents, my mum, and whatnot in a different room. We're sat this TV. No one can stop us. We can watch whatever we want, and we watched like loads of horror movies. And yeah, this is when we watched the Terminator. And just as you pointed out a moment ago, yes, it is like a slasher movie in its appearance, but the science fictional storyline concepts are what make it a cut above the rest, that make it so thrilling, isn't it? I can remember being like really scared by the Terminator endoskeleton itself. The James Cameron dream imagery, the skeleton rising out of the flames and like chasing after Kyle and Sarah. Did
Yeah,
you not find that sequence like?
absolutely, the relentlessness of it.
Yeah.
It was haunting, and the worst thing about it is that when you compare it to the other slashers like Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason, all of that, those characters, they're evil. They're kind of, they're malevolent. They're kind of, but this, it's not an evil character. It is just an unrelenting robot that won't stop until it's utterly destroyed. And somehow that's more terrifying.
That is scarier. Because it's, well, as this discussion goes on, we'll be discussing this. We're getting into the themes here, which I don't want to talk about just yet. But yeah, it's the unknowable nature of science, isn't it? And machinery in the face of human adversity, that makes it so potent and so powerful. So yeah, I'm going to give a quick rundown of the plot. We all know the plot, but let's just do it for a quick refresher. I'll be complimenting, should I say, on often, just like in the previous segment of Robocop, this script is so smart. It's so clever. Such that little techniques, such as the way it exposes information about its world building. Do you rewatch the film? I take it just recently, Mark.
Yeah.
Did you notice any expository dialogue or any exposition in the film?
Well, I noticed that there was not much in the way of like explanation, as in apart from the obvious when Kyle Reese is going into detail about the future, the conversations that you'd expect to happen in that situation.
Exactly. It's all done through narrative and character.
Exactly.
You have that very, very simple, brief half-page, of text at the beginning of the film, which ends with "it's going to be dealt with tonight," which I loved. It's already insinuating that something big is going to happen. But yeah, there's, none. It's all done with reason. Kyle explains much of the situation while driving away from the Terminator to Sarah, which kind of feels believable, really, because
absolutely. If a man like that appeared out of nowhere, you would want him to fill you in and just go, what the actual hell is going on? There would have to be conversation. So.
Yeah, it's all happening at the same time. While they've got the soundtrack, and you've got Arnie chasing them, and the cars, and it's all so intense, and you're like enthralled by what you're watching, but you're soaking in the exposition at the same time, and it's a cheeky way to do it. Is very good. But yeah, after nuclear war, the machines enslave and wipe out mankind. After years of struggle, man eventually defeats the machines, and Skynet, the AI behind it all, sends one of its Terminator stealth machines back in time to kill the mother of the leader of the resistance, John Connor. John Connor sends a lone soldier back to stop it. It's incredible. We get visual storytelling at several points, don't we? You know, at the beginning, after this page of dialogue, we get like the future war scenes, and they are harrowing. You know, absolutely harrowing.
Fields of skulls and
the skulls is something I've always remembered. Remembered. So iconic. And the blues, the blacks and the blues, the dark colors that imbue everything. And then we get sequences. We get flashback sequences later on, don't we? When they're in a quieter time, which I think is effectively placed, isn't it? You know, we get like massive action sequences that happen. I think it's the police station sequence, isn't it? When they end up in that under that bridge or something, and we get the flashback, which is the exposition. The exposition here is given to the viewer at a time of low narrative pacing, which I think is effective. You know, we're just winding down from the action sequence that's just happened. Sarah Connor and Kyle are talking, they're getting to know each other. Is very effective. Very, very effective. So speaking of characters, Mark, there are several characters in this movie that would go on to become iconic. None more iconic than, of course, the Terminator himself. What do you think of the Terminator in this? Of Arnold Schwarzenegger's T-800? Noted as the T-101 in this version. I think they retcon it, don't they, later on?
I heard that at one point on the rewatch, and I was like, wait, what? Like, T-800 is what he's known as at the end of the day, but I caught that. Well, Arnold, I mean, this was the making of him in terms of, like, this was his, I mean, he'd been known before, I guess, but this was...
He did Conan the Barbarian before this.
Yeah, but this was the one that put him up to top-level status, and it is understandable why. This role was made for him. I mean, whilst intention was made for it to be Lance Henriksen, as you say, I can't see anyone else playing this role.
No. Let me hold you there quickly. So, when he was cast, production of this film was halted for a period of time because Schwarzenegger was contracted to make Conan the Destroyer, and apparently he was asked about what else he's going to be doing, and he described the Terminator as just some shitty little movie. How amazing is that?
That's hilarious. To be honest, from his perception prior to seeing the impact, he probably just saw it as a B-movie horror slasher sort of thing.
Yeah. It's the film that made him. You know, it's easily, without fail, his most iconic role.
Oh, absolutely. It's the most quoted line out of all of Arnold's.
There's many quotable lines, but it is probably one of the greatest film lines in the history of cinema. You know, the "I'll be back" line.
It's up there with "I am your father." It's one of those lines that's just it's been pastiched, referenced constantly all the way throughout cinema.
But I think after you, sorry.
And it is still seeing it again, seeing that entire scene of which that line comes from. The line is still fucking awesome.
I mean, the film plays to his strengths. Arnold Schwarzenegger is not Sir Ian McKellen. Let's get this out there, you know.
Now Sir McKellen playing the role of Terminator.
You know, he's not a thespian. You know, he's not a smart guy, but not, you know, the world's greatest actor. Obviously, he got better as time went on, but
he's smart enough to recognise his limitations as well.
Absolutely. And it's his imposing physique. Do you know how old he was when he made this movie?
I do not know.
37 years old.
Really? Like, bloody hell.
He had retired from bodybuilding for like over 10 years at this point.
Credit where credit's due. So
What incredible, exactly, incredible. But you know, like, it's almost, I don't want to say it like it's a critique, but one would often say that a bad performance could be robotic, couldn't they? But there's also a lot of like great physical acting that Arnold Schwarzenegger does in this movie. You know, there are like many subtle hints to the nature of his being, his real nature, such as when he first appears, you know, and he's like just looking left, right, and his eyes are scanning left, right, left, right. Nothing human about it at all, you know. There's just more movement to a human being, but instead he just rises
no
slowly,
emotion, nothing.
stops,
Yeah.
you know, like it's very subtle, but very clever. I mean, obviously the human being, you know, let's say the human being that he represents, you would not want to be caught in his sights ever. He looks like he would break your neck, like a chicken, to quote him, you know. But one thing I did think was quite interesting, maybe it's because it's before he had elocution lessons, I don't know, maybe he got more acting lessons later on, but all of his lines are delivered in such an emotionless manner. It's almost like you can see it's a robot talking how a robot thinks a human should.
And
You know?
that delivery is all the more intimidating because there's no emotion in them.
Yes.
Like, if you saw him get angry or something, it'd almost look like weakness. The fact that he has no anger or anything other than
it's just
yeah.
pure straight faced concentration. It's not even concentration. It's a straight face. It's like, you know, that's it. But in his actual dialogue, there's like little flavor or contrast in his pronunciation, almost toneless, you know, and that just makes it, as you say, even scarier, even more believable. On like one of the many YouTube documentaries out there, I saw them mention that he had gone to like gun training because he wanted to be able to fire the guns without blinking, you know.
Excellent idea.
Yeah. And when he murders the Sarah Connors, you know, like a lot of the shots are on his face, aren't they? And they are,
or him looming and slowly coming forwards.
yeah, that's right. Just completely matter of fact, like completely like ambivalent to his surroundings. This is a creature.
Yeah, there's not even excitement in his eye or anything other than just
Nothing.
like, yeah,
because he's a robot. Because it's not there. He's programmed with a job. And I'm going to get into contrasting his persona with Kyle Reese, his counterpart, in a moment. But like when he first goes up to the first Sarah Connor and he like, you know, just walks up to the door, knocks on the door, opens the door. Are you Sarah Connor? Yes, bang, dead. You know, shoots, carries on. Like it's just
no monologue, no explanation like you'd expect from a villain or anything.
You know,
just yeah.
Kind of like Michael Myers in that regard, I suppose, if you think about it. Michael Myers never said anything. He just walked around. Although sometimes he stood around trying to look
intimidating.
Whereas the Terminator doesn't do that. He just walks. He doesn't like stand in the garden through like, you know, the sheets looking at you through the window, staring at you, letting you know he's going to kill you. If that was the T-800, they wouldn't have gone to the garden. They would have just knocked on the front door and kicked it down and walked in. As is the case actually in the film multiple times. You know, I think one of the most harrowing moments of the film is when she does it a couple of times where Sarah Connor calls someone and ends up speaking to the Terminator directly without realizing.
That's one thing that actually that's one sequence where he actually, with the scenes where he talks with someone else's voice. I think
weird.
Two come to mind. One's when he's in the cop car and he talks on the radio, and the other is when he's talking with a female voice.
It's her mother.
And that's something is just so unsettling.
What's unsettling about it is the way he's just sat in that chair, just
not
with
moving,
leaning back, not moving, holding it like that, and around him. You have to look carefully for it because it's quite a dark set. You can see that the place has been destroyed. and he's
Yeah.
like pretending to be her mother and says, "I love you too, honey," and puts the phone down.
And that's so
And it's like that's
yeah.
such incredible like visual narrative storytelling. Rather than even showing him killing her mother, you just get the aftermath and the narrative drive of him waiting for her to make that mistake and then her making that mistake. Ah, just it's so economic, you know. Unless a writer would show the death to be what shocking or bloody or something, you know. But then we've seen him kill innocent women already. We've seen him kill enough police officers by this point as well. Do we need to see him kill any more? It's that effective technique of letting the scene unravel in your mind.
Yeah. Hearing the
You
voice
know,
first and then pulling back to realise that it's not.
yeah.
It's
Ah,
yeah.
it's fantastic. It's so harrowing. You know, an absolutely harrowing performance and character, let's say. Often regarded as one of the greatest villains of all time. I mean, what even is it about the metallic skeleton visual that's so? I mean, it's like a representation of death, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know,
It's
the
I
skull.
think it is the fact that Skynet literally fashioned its greatest creation or its killing machine on humans.
Mhm.
I mean, giving it the skeletal
Well,
structure
the
of
the storyline is, isn't it, that those models are specifically designed to be stealth models, aren't they?
yeah.
And they're grafted with skin to break into, you know, the resistance bunkers. I think that if I remember correctly, definitely in Terminator 1, because the reveal of the metal skeleton is saved for the end. The future war sequences, you don't see any T-800 skeletons fighting. It's all the hunter-killer robot harvesters, isn't it? And the narrative suggests that those Terminator models are specifically used for stealth encounters, which I think the second film kind of does away with, doesn't it? Because you see the Terminators
Yeah.
in the future war.
I mean, the only revelation you get is when those dogs start barking.
That's
When
right.
they're checking the people as they come into the bunkers.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. So yes, the Terminator. Another quick point about the Terminator as well, which I think is really interesting, is the teeth. They're human teeth, aren't they?
Yeah.
And that,
Actually, you're right. Yeah.
yeah, they
I
don't look
suppose
like,
because that's what could be seen, right? If they got the
yeah. But what it suggests as well, you know, further like narrative suggestion. Skynet, you know, killing humans and using their teeth to make Terminators potentially.
God, that's dark.
That's dark. But yeah, and then we get to Kyle Reese, played by Michael Biehn. How do you feel about Michael Biehn slash Kyle Reese, Mark?
Ah, he's brilliant.
Mhm.
I mean, he's everything the Terminator isn't in this movie. It's like, I mean, he is a ball of emotion and fear and passion. And he's trying to, he's trying to. He's got the same aspect of he's got a mission, he's got to do it, but he's so much more human about it, for want of a better term. In that he's got a level of desperation for the majority of the movie that's really enjoyable to watch.
That's what makes him relatable, isn't it? He brings Michael Biehn sort of presents to us a passionate, desperate hero that hides like an inner fragility that is in such contrast with the Terminator. You know, even the earliest scenes when they're first transported to our time, he falls down. You know, he's like in pain. He's got scars on his back. He's almost rat-like in appearance.
Oh, he slaps down on that asphalt like a lump of steak, doesn't he?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then he's like sneaking around, weak looking, wary looking. You know, whereas like the Terminator, like I guess how it's filmed and how Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance is so precise, isn't it? As precise as a machine. When he kills the punks, Bill Paxton, and what's his name? The guy who played Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
I thought
Yeah,
I recognised that guy.
yeah,
I'll be honest. I mean, I was sat
yeah,
there, it's like, I know
yeah.
you. I didn't get around to checking out who it was, but you know when you
And
see a face and
yeah,
like, yeah,
and Toombs as well from X Files.
yeah.
Whenever I think of Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat Annihilation, I always want to like insert a clip. In my head, I just hear the "It is glorious" line. Maybe I'll insert it here. Anyway, and you know, the way he like dispatches these two, he just stands in front of them and looks at them. Give me your clothes, whatever. dead. Whereas, Reese is just so much more desperate.
Oh, he doesn't seek confrontation. He runs at first sign of possible trouble. Yeah,
exactly. He's constantly on edge. He's wired because of the future he comes from. Forever under attack. Forever, under the threat of death. And like when he's running through those alleyways, looking around, it's almost like that's all he knows. And that's something that I find most admirable, not just about this script, but about Michael Biehn's performance. When as previously discussed, when they're sitting down having a break, getting to know each other, Sarah asks Kyle to talk, and all he can talk about is how awful the future is. He just talks about it in such a matter-of-fact, believable way. And doesn't she ask him about women? And he's like, they're strong, intelligent, brave, and that's not like the typical response. Maybe
no, that's the kind of person that survives in the future.
That's the only kind of woman that he knows.
Yeah.
And that's just everything is just so direct and so intense permanently with Michael Biehn's performance. It makes it feel like he really believes in his mission, and it makes us comprehend the importance of his mission. And I think Michael Biehn brings a certain level of humanity in general with his performances. In Aliens, as Hicks, he's able to play this tough, strong male character, yet he's able to relate to women on an emotional level without losing any of his masculinity, isn't he?
He's the one who connects with Ripley the most out of all of the Marines.
Exactly, because he's the one who's the least, rah, rah, rah,
I mean, he's got machismo, but it's not a case of an arrogance to it or anything like that.
It's a different kind of masculinity. It's the kind of masculinity of a man that I think
self-assured
is more heroic. The real heroes are the ones that just get on and do it. They don't brag about it. They don't go on about it. They don't flex. They just crack on. And that's exactly the kind of character that I think Michael Biehn is so good at playing. But furthermore, Kyle Reese's character arc is one of tragedy in the grand scheme of things, isn't it? Tragedy and heroism that makes him even more appealing. He goes across time, not even knowing that he's about to become the father of the hero of the future that he's supposed to be protecting by going back in time in the first place. There's that great dialogue when, well, I'll get to that in a second, because he goes back in time and he tells Sarah that he came for her because he believed that he was in love with her, and he reveals that John, his son, gave him a picture of, Sarah when she was young, and it is described that John spoke of her as a kind of leader, a great teacher, great world building there. Reese talking of the future, his experiences, and creating this context. When you look at Linda Hamilton and Sarah Connor, who's supposed to be a teenager, and talking about her like this great hero.
Well, it's everything she's not at that point.
At that point, that's correct.
Having a man from beyond appear to you and tell you that you are destined for such great things, and
she doesn't believe it.
No, of course she couldn't, because the person he's describing at that point, she can't relate to. She can't see that person.
She's just a silly 19-year-old, isn't she? I mean, at the beginning of the film, when she's a waitress, she's like, a bit ham-fisted, making mistakes. A child puts ice cream in her apron. She's a boyfriend dumps her, or cancels a date and whatever, and she's
living a normal life. She's
but nothing special either, is she? She's nothing special. I think that's what it's saying. She's very normal and therefore relatable. But we'll get to Linda Hamilton in a second. But I just wanted to say that I don't know if you know about this, Mark. This is another Metal Gear Solid reference. Did you know that the original, I want to say it was the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System,
Mhm.
Metal Gear Solid cover was actually a picture of Kyle Reese from this film.
I didn't know that.
So in the future war scenes, can you remember Kyle Reese running through the junk and the field of skulls, being chased by one of the hunt killers, and
Yeah,
he's got a headband on?
yeah.
Solid Snake.
Now,
Hideo Kojima is a man of great taste.
yeah. Now you say it. Now you say it. I can see it.
It is very similar, isn't it, in terms of the way they. Whereas Snake Plissken is a bit more of an asshole than Solid Snake / Kyle Reese is. It's the softly spoken man that has been carried over, isn't it? The softly spoken man that just does what he's going to do and doesn't need to brag about it.
Yeah.
Back
You
to
could
that.
say that, yeah, Solid Snake is an amalgamation of those two specific heroes. Yeah.
But yeah, as you were just saying a minute ago, talking about character archetypes, we have the true hero of this story, the character that goes on the hero's journey, as we so often relate back to the Hero of Thousand Faces, the novel description. And
Although this is somewhat of a unique hero in that regard,
why would you
because
say it's unique?
the journey that he thinks he's going on.
I'm not saying I'm not sorry. I was about to move on to Sarah Connor actually, but go with what you're going to say there. If we're still talking, go with what you're going to say.
There's the classic archetype of the call to arms, but because of the time travel element of this story, it creates a cyclic nature to it.
Yes.
It's not a conventional call to arms story, but it is still, because he was there because he believed he just had to protect Sarah. He didn't realize how much more important he was, and how much more important John realized he was.
He never knew either. That's what makes it so tragic.
That this was a different kind of story where the man who sent him on the mission already knows that he succeeds.
Yes.
Purely by virtue of his own existence.
Yes.
And that
yes, it is insinuated, isn't it, that John knows that Kyle is his father, but it's not explicitly stated. And it's that same thing again with the script and painting images of the world, the greater world, the world building of the Terminator universe, but it existing in your imagination as you are watching it. And that makes it infinitely more relatable than showing it on screen. Those scenes that are painted in my mind via Kyle Reese's exposition are as, vivid and powerful as anything in this film.
That does raise an interesting point. Do you think that John Connor knew that Kyle Reese was his father?
That's what I was just saying. I think it's insinuated.
Because you're right, it never gets outright said. And I remember in later Terminator movies, John Connor as a young boy says he didn't know who his father was. He was just some guy my mum hung out with when she was younger. She hadn't explained it to him at that point, had she?
I mean, was there a photo of him? No.
No.
I imagine that at some point it is explained to him, because it must be explained to him for him to send for Kyle to go back. I mean, let's put ourselves in this situation right now, right? Let's do a bit of headcanon. So, in the future war, the humans have won. And then they find out that as a last-ditch effort, Skynet sends a Terminator back to kill the mother of John Connor, John Connor's mother. Let's say you're John Connor. What do? You'd probably go back yourself, wouldn't you?
It'd be the first instinct.
It would be the first instinct, I think. Well, leaders are more important and need to stay, let's say, to live and to rule and to... Well, I don't think that's the right term, is it? But I think that would be the first instinct, is that I need to go back and save my mother. The fact that Kyle is the one that goes back, the fact that before all this happens, John gives Kyle a picture of Sarah Connor, and he never understands why, says to me that he always knew that Kyle was his father and that he was going to be the one to go back. And he was effectively, let's say, nurturing the love that Kyle Reese will have for Sarah Connor. The love that is there for them that one night. Which brings us to another great point, actually, which is something that I asked you to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And that is when Kyle is talking about the photo of Sarah Connor, the iconic photo now of Sarah sat in the car with the headband, and he shows it to her and says, "This picture is the picture that John gave me of you." and he says, "I always wondered what it was that you were thinking about in this picture."
Yeah, that was that when the realization hit as to the
What is
cyclic
it?
aspect.
What's the
For me,
cycle?
the cycle is that he's looking at a photo of a woman who's thinking about him.
Yeah, Jesus, dude.
That was it. When she was thinking about how would I describe
Yeah.
Kyle Reese to my son,
Oh my
and
God.
it was that when that clicked.
Just,
'Cause
I'm
that's
getting
something that had gone
goosebumps.
past me. Like I totally didn't.
I'm
Yeah,
getting goosebumps just talking about it.
that
Just
was a
like
moment when it was just it was
it elevates the
so
movie.
yeah.
It elevates the movie for me.
Because I will be honest, when you
Oh,
told me to rewatch back, and I was like, "Oh, she's going to be thinking about the future," but no, it's so much more specific than that. And
oh my
the
God.
idea of a man just looking at a picture of a woman he's never met, and that picture is of the woman thinking about him.
Oh,
That's such a good,
so powerful.
yeah, it's just a good
So
stuff.
powerful. And it's the woman he's going to sacrifice his life for. The woman he's going to have a child with. The
And
woman
there was
that,
that
oh,
line that she says when she's thinking about him, where she goes, "In just in a couple of hours, we had a lifetime's worth of a relationship or something to that tune." I forget.
we loved a lifetime's worth.
Yeah, that's it.
I may have copied that line in one of my stories. I just love that line.
It's a great line.
It's so good. So many great lines. The script work in this film is just top notch. I mean, you know, there were other writers who touched up dialogue, let's say, from James Cameron's original script. I know that, but he is, for the most part, his work, and you know,
Well, there are so many moments when, even in the second one as well, where there's a lot of monologuing, like internal monologue, where it just plays out. We're often with Sarah Connor just thinking and just considering the situation, and some of those lines just they resonate.
Mhm.
They're
But
so
let's go back.
specific.
Let's go to Sarah Connor now in Terminator 1, and I've got this little quote from you right now, actually, and it's from the original script. It's a description of Sarah Connor on her entrance. It's Sarah Connor is 19, small, and delicate features, pretty in a flawed, accessible way. She doesn't stop the party when she walks in, but you'd like to get to know her. Her vulnerable quality masks a strength even she doesn't know exists. How do you? Obviously, that is the character we know, but how do you feel about Linda Hamilton's performance?
I think that was the point, isn't it? Is that she's meant to be the most unassuming, the one you wouldn't have thought would birth the savior of humanity.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
When that's fully explained to you and you start to have the realization of what exactly it is that her place in this entire story, at first you are like somewhat surprised. I mean, you don't expect the savior of humanity to be a gun-toting badass. Well, that comes later.
Of course,
But
yeah.
yeah, but
Well,
she's so sort of like unassuming in that it is genuinely a shock when you start to realize her importance in the story. You think she's just going to be just a side character that gets dragged along for the ride.
she comes across like initially like Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween. Let's say. I mean, don't get me wrong. Jamie Lee Curtis is a strong female character as well, isn't it? In the grand scheme of things, in the grand arc of that film. But do you know how old Linda Hamilton was when she made this film?
No, how old?
28.
I will be honest. I mean, 19 did sound a touch young.
It's a bit young for her, isn't it? She's.
Yeah,
I think the reason why they cast an older woman though was because they needed someone who came across as mature beyond their years and beyond their age. Because I
then it
think
did
with
run the risk of falling into that teenagers with the slasher kind of chasing them.
yeah, they needed someone who came across as legitimate and confident, let's say, not necessarily as a person, but in the way they act. I've always thought that Linda Hamilton's had really interesting eyes. She's got very expressive, big, I think they're blue, big blue eyes. And so when she's listening to Kyle, she's listening with her eyes and acting with her eyes. When she's scared, you can see it with her eyes. But also it's her voice. There's something about her voice. Is it quite deep or is it quite, I'm not really sure. I can't really explain it.
It's got a resonance to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's not bassy, but it's what makes those internal monologue moments so poignant because it is a very thoughtful voice. You can see it like slowly considering a situation.
But the truth is that as you put a minute ago, she is not yet in brackets a super strong, ripped woman who can fight men. But the truth is, neither is Reese. They get through these this series of horrific experiences through their tenacity and their will to survive, isn't it?
The skin of their teeth on a couple of occasions. Yeah,
literally. My God, they're literally like, But there is a little bit of synergy between scenes that I really like, and that's when Reese tells Sarah that she used to become this great war leader, and she says, "You telling me you're from the future or something like that?" And she says, "I'm some war leader." She doesn't believe it at all. And then there's that sequence where they're running away from the Terminator at the very end, and he's wounded, and she pulls him up, and what does she say? She says, "On your feet, soldier." And I think it's got great duology. The meaning works in multiple ways with this sequence. I feel like in character, Sarah is obviously trying to get Reese to get up, and she's doing it by talking to him like a soldier. She's trying to get to him, to make him get up. But it's also representing her growth. Because at this moment, she becomes the character of agency, as was discussed. Reese's narrative arc is one of tragedy. He dies, and it's left for Sarah. And in the end, it's Sarah who survives. Sarah's the one who kills the Terminator, destroys the Terminator, let's say, and is on her way to become the great leader, the mother of the great leader, the teacher of the great leader that Kyle Reese describes. It's powerful stuff, really. That speech that Kyle recites it's memorized, isn't it, from John's words, I think, goes a long way as well. You got anything else to say about Sarah?
I do feel that this is one of the greats of cinema. I mean, this is one of the greats of cinema in early days. She's up there with Ripley in terms of what she becomes later, especially. Yeah, it is. It's interesting to see the groundwork laid for this character early on. Right, they committed the entire movie to showing her as how she was before, and that makes it so much poignant when you see what she becomes later.
In the end, she is a strong female character, but she is strong as a woman, isn't she? And Kyle is strong as a weak man, frankly, in comparison to the Terminator. That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Getting to.
But he wasn't there to fight the Terminator. He was there to tell her to run.
Yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly what he says, isn't it? When he is fighting with the Terminator at the end, he says, "Run," and pushes her away and starts fighting with it with like some metal pole. But that's I've always felt that is like the great theme of this story. It's always been about the tenacity of the human spirit in absolutely unimaginable circumstances. You can talk about technology, the 80s, the rise of the computer, fears over nuclear weapons. I mean, the nuclear threat is the threat of something just happening and killing you, isn't it, out of the blue, and you never even knowing.
And having no way of which you could have avoided it.
Yeah, and I suppose the Terminator coming back in time and turning up in your house and killing you is not far off that. The idea of nuclear war was always something that scared me as a child. I've always had a very active imagination. Maybe I should not have watched films like this when I was very young because of that. But nuclear war and that kind of thing, that dystopian future was always something that I found very unsettling. And the context that is created by showing these scenes of the future just adds more potency to the desperation in the protagonists as well. We're shown what we're trying to prevent. Well, not prevent, because the war is won, isn't it? It's gonna have that's something else that's really interesting about this film, isn't it? The ending. But did you have anything else to say about the themes of the movie? Did you feel like there's anything else apart from like the fear of technology and science completely overtaking humanity, let's say, the human spirit, I personally feel is like the core theme of this film. Was there anything else in there for you?
It's also a film about, for want of a better term, destiny.
Of course, yes.
I mean, even to the point wherein she, right at the end, when she drives towards the storm, in what is obviously meant to be a metaphor for what she's actually doing, in terms of
Yes.
she is, rather than running now, which is what she spent the movie doing, she's now choosing to drive into the storm.
Yes.
She's actually going to face the conflict head on.
Yes.
And strengthen herself through the conflict.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because the actual narrative arc in this film, when you take it as a single picture, not knowing about Terminator 2, it ends. The conflict in this movie is created by the appearance of the killer. And a hero wants to protect the heroine from the killer. The killer is killed. The hero dies, unfortunately. The heroine survives. It is the end of the movie. But there's that knowing that the Great War's still going to come. She's going to give birth to a son, and it's going to be hard. And the whole of humanity is going to be destroyed. But humanity is going to rise again and still win eventually. And that kind of makes the ending a bittersweet.
Yes, because there is no other way. At least that's what this movie preaches. I feel that they started to change it in later itinerations in terms
That's when they
of...
started to lose sight of it, wasn't it? There's that. I don't want to talk about it because we're going to do it. We'll talk about it one day, but just to sum it up, no fate but what we make. That's that great line, isn't it, from the second film?
That was the point at which they started to question destiny.
Indeed. So I do like to talk about the soundtracks when we discuss films, Mark, and this is a big one.
Oh my god, man, those 4 drum beats.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yes. I mean, it's so much more simple than the Robocop theme with the rising horns and everything. This is just an ongoing, just ominous war
all the way through the film as well. You've got
yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. In all the Terminator scenes. So
it's not rising or falling, it's just constant.
What is interesting is that the soundtrack to this film actually has quite a lot in common with Robocop in how I feel it represents the on-screen action, because Brad Fiedel, the composer, has stated, have you heard about any of his read or heard him talk about the soundtrack at all ever?
Not as such, no.
Because he has described the dun 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 dun, and that beat when the other Terminator's on screen as a representation of the heart of a machine. It's the main theme of the movie. The main theme of this movie is 4 notes, and it's just dun 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 dun. That's it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Apparently, he came about by accident. He did by accident. But what is even more iconic, obviously, is the melody that comes alongside.
Oh, that softer.
Yeah. What do you think that represents?
That's the human element, isn't it?
Yes. I've been conflicted about it multiple times. There were points when I thought, in this movie, is it Kyle Reese's music?
No, I feel that because that song, I associate it most in this entire movie with the sequence when they're both together.
Yes, because you get the romanticized piano interpretation when they make love and conceive John Connor. And it is literally like a theme for humanity. My God, man, that's fucking great, isn't it? It's great.
It's a song about life, yeah.
It's like like Robocop is like sonically the war between the machine and the man, musically, sonically. So is Terminator's score, interestingly enough. Oh, it's great, isn't it?
I never saw it like that, I'll be honest. Yeah.
It's great, mate. It's great. A lot of the scenes where Kyle is triumphant, you get renditions of the human melody, and it's quite melancholic as well. It's quite melancholic when you hear it. It's heartfelt.
It resonates from one to another after that truck explosion, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes.
I think that's the key moment where you think you've hit the ending of the movie. It'd be
Yes.
perfectly fine to end the movie there. The truck he was in just exploded,
Mhm,
and then suddenly that metal skeleton stands up,
mhm.
and yeah, that was a horrifying moment. And
Yeah.
as you say, that moment you saw there, because that's what James Cameron. When you say he was talking about a metallic skeleton rising up out of the flames,
Mhm,
that was his realization, wasn't it?
mhm, mhm. There's his fever dream.
Yeah.
So, I think one of the things that makes this film stand out, as we have discussed, is that while on the surface it's not on the surface because of the science fiction ideas, but like if you look at its core elements, it's like a slasher film, isn't it? But it's so much more. It says so much about humanity. I mean, do you think it's realistic for Kyle Reese to be in love with Sarah Connor before he travels? I don't know. I feel like
Well, he's already become enamored with the idea of her through the stories that have been told.
I'm just gonna say, like, this is a different universe, a different world, and like, and Kyle, when he speaks of his world, speaks only of the desperation and awfulness of it. And I feel like maybe humanity is like almost emotionally stunted,
Hmm.
in the
There are
future.
too many love stories in the future.
Exactly. How can there be? How can there be? There are children, obviously. You've got the scene with the children, like watching the TV that's on fire. There are children, but
Yeah.
are there relationships? Is there real feeling when you're forever trapped? He's got barcodes on his wrist, on his forearm. Sorry, suggesting being a prisoner.
Concentration camp.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's revealed in later films that humans were put to work for the machines. It's basically insinuated by just having that one scene, that
Yeah.
one shot of that thing on his arm. You know, you get the impression there isn't time for love, to quote Robert Heinlein. No time for love. And is that the book? I can't remember. And for me personally, I think that makes it quite realistic that he would love her and that he would fall in love with her, essentially, over heels.
Well, it's the first innocence he's probably met.
Yes, 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 definitely, definitely. Because as he described, women in the future are strong, great fighters. And of course, Sarah is strong and would become a great fighter at this point in the narrative. She is not empowered, let's say, with a fighter's body, let's say. She has a
He hasn't got
fighting
the.
spirit,
Yeah.
but she hasn't got the experience yet, let's say. So, yeah, I think you could be right there, actually. I think it could definitely be something about her innocence as well. I mean, obviously, Linda Hamilton was a very attractive woman at the time, so I don't think it is
That's
particularly,
certainly sweeten the deal.
yeah,
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, as I said, though, I think there is something about Michael Bean's performance in this film that makes him so relatable. You
Yeah.
know, they have a connection in the same way that he has a connection with Ripley, with Sigourney Weaver in Aliens. There's just something about him being an empathetic character on screen with women. Maybe it's the context as well, though, because in Aliens, as mentioned, the context of the Marines, in Aliens, he didn't do the training, did he, with the Marines? Because his part was played by James Remar originally, who did the training, and then Remar was no good for the role. They got Bean in, and that's one of the reasons why maybe in the performance he comes across as an outsider. But in this film, it's much more intentional because of the dialogue and his, general performance, let's say. I think you could discuss this movie on its many levels for a long time, to be honest with you. There's just so many details. There's so many great YouTube videos about all the Easter eggs and stuff.
And the subtleties of the
Oh,
cinematography and
I
yeah.
never even realized. I mean, like, here's something for you actually. What about the sequence in Tech Noir, the the nightclub where Sarah is sat and the Terminator goes to shoot her, and Kyle Reese is waiting. During that scene, you've got the song "Burning in the Third Degree," and just as like Arnie's Terminator is going to shoot her, the lyrics are going, "You've got me burning in the third degree," which is like burning. You think of fire, you think of being in the line of fire, you think of being maybe in great heat, red.
The
You know
pressure,
the the burning gaze of the Terminator's red eyes. I mean,
it hits on a subconscious level. Yeah, sometimes
s-
you don't even realise you're hearing it because you're too focused
oh,
on the fact that Arnie's getting closer.
yeah, that's right. He's got,
So-
he's got the gun. Oh,
It's even like little touches like that red dot. That just there's something about that sort of like the way in which it just methodically comes up, and just
but then you get the red light over the screen, and the viewers see the red light, don't they? As well, you become Sarah Connor. I guess you are. I suppose the viewer is Sarah Connor. I suppose she is kind of the cipher because she's the relatable one, in a sense, because she's the human, but she experiences this this world and learns about it as we do with her. So, which I never thought of actually before, to be honest with you, and that makes a lot of sense. You know,
it helps you relate to the whole concept of this isn't something you can fight. This is only something you can run from because he cuts an imposing figure.
Yeah.
Every moment when it shows him, I mean, the police station sequence alone.
Oh my God,
that is just shows him as just. I don't know if force of nature is the right term, but he is just a tank.
I was paying attention to how like the police officers are shooting him, and they come out, they go bang, and they stand there, and like there's like always like a brief second where the Terminator gets to shoot back because obviously he is unfazed by bullets. And it makes sense. Because I think when you shoot someone, you expect them to go down, and they stand there shocked for a minute, waiting for something to happen, and it doesn't. You know.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great. So you definitely came across as less excited to rewatch and talk about the film than I was. So, how do you still feel the same way about the film? How do you feel about this film? What is your review? Let's say
it'd been a while since I'd watched this movie. I mean, I've seen it several times over my life, but not in recent years. And coupled with the fact that you have talked about it in the past, and also the fact that you asked me to sort of like just consider certain points, specifically that photograph, that really kind of changed the ending for me.
Yeah.
And it cast it in a newer light. It gave it a certain extra dimension to the ending. I actually enjoyed this movie a lot more than I thought. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a terrible movie or anything like that. It's a good movie. It's a solid movie. It's the thing about this movie though is it doesn't have everything I'm looking for. When we compare this to the likes of Robocop has that tongue-in-cheek humor. It's the self-awareness. But this is different. This is a lot more poignancy, and it's got a lot more emotion to it on a much more fundamental level. And you do have the emotion in Robocop, wherein you've got the man at war with himself. But this is
I think the emotion in Robocop is more apparent, whereas the emotion in this film is embedded and is subtextual.
And whilst parallels can be drawn between the movies, they're two very different movies.
Of course,
about the human spirit. Don't get me wrong; they are both stories about human spirit and the tenacity, as you say, of humans and the will to survive. But just told from two different perspectives.
What would you rate this movie out of 10?
I'm wavering between 8 and 9.
Interesting.
I'm going to say it's an 8 for me.
An 8? So I've been wrestling with this because for me it's always been a 9 for me personally. And rewatching it recently and analysing it, I actually asked myself, is this a perfect movie? And I couldn't find any flaws. Are there any flaws in this movie?
Not in the narrative or the storytelling.
I mean, there is that bit when he runs away from the police after the crash, which is a bit, I suppose, you could, if you want to be really, really nitpicky, I suppose, but that's just being really nitpicky in my opinion. But
my only criticisms I can really levy at this movie, and they are very, very, very minor, and it's only because it's a product of its time, is the terms of the limitations of the technology.
Special effects.
Yes. I will say that there is something a little bit jangly about the way in which that T-800 skeleton moves.
It
right
kind
at
of
the end.
works, though.
It does give it an alien-esque kind of like.
Yeah, it's Sam Winston and stop motion, isn't it? And it's just
Yeah.
it kind of works for me.
I mean, it's still unsettling as all fuck. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just at the same time, I feel that the only limitations this movie really had was due to its constraints in budget and technology. It was
of
like
course.
the actual narrative, storytelling, characters, acting. That was all brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. This is it. Like, I don't think I could give it a 10 out of 10. I think it is a 9. I don't know. It's really confused me because of, like I said, the subtext in this movie is so strong. But it's strong in all of Cameron's movies. All of his movies have these great themes to really get your teeth into, to really think about and analyze. And for those that want to, be it, Aliens is obviously about motherhood, isn't it? And
Yeah.
Terminator 2, while also being about fate, is about fatherhood as well. And both of those concepts resonate with so strongly, as well as the typical human tenacity exists in most stories. But yeah, it's funny, I can honestly say that I do think this is a perfect movie, but I don't think it's a 10 out of 10. It's smart, it's action-packed, it's paced expertly, and it's full of incredible ideas and imagery, and its world-building is astounding. Terminator 2 may well be as good as it is because of the heavy lifting done in this
I feel
film.
that both those movies, Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, elevate each other.
Yes, definitely.
Through their connections to each other. The fact that they utilized aspects of this movie for the setup for the second one.
Yes.
And certain payoffs in the second one call back to the first one.
Yes.
They lift each other up.
It's a spoiler, I suppose, for when we discuss Terminator 2, which we will do. But in the extended edition of Terminator 2, do you remember there being a scene where Kyle has a cameo and talks to Sarah in her cell?
Yeah, I do.
But I feel like Kyle Reese in the cell in that movie sort of represents her strength. Maybe it's her subconscious.
She embodies it as being Kyle, as the person who keeps her going. Yeah,
I'm not sure if that weakens her as a character, though. To be honest,
no, I mean that'd be
I'm
good.
not sure.
He is the person that introduced her to her strengths.
But oh no, let's discuss this another time. Actually, this is interesting. I'm definitely going to think about that. That's actually made me wonder how I feel about that. But anyway, that's a massive digression there. I don't know what happened there.
It happens.
Oh, it is the link between the two. That's right. Because before the money checks got so big that Linda Hamilton came back for the last Terminator film, she went on record multiple times and said, "I don't know why they keep making sequels. The story's finished and it's perfect already." And because Terminator 1 and 2, they are perfect movies. So I think that may be a good place to leave it, because I suppose we've talked about this movie and its themes and its characters and its ideas, but they do run into and are continued and taken to their natural conclusion in Terminator 2. So I suppose there's more to come, isn't there? With Robocop, when we talked about Robocop earlier, I felt like we really hammered that one down. But this one feels a bit unfinished, actually. But I think that's because...
I suppose in some way you could say, as far as the Terminator franchise, we'll be back.
Oh, dear. Oh, I'm going to edit that out. No, I'm not joking. Okay, fine. Well, yeah, let's put an end to it there then, shall we? So, this was a good one, Mark. I enjoyed this. How did you feel?
I enjoyed it as well. It's making me go back to stuff that was established in my history that I always go, yeah, I've seen that movie, but it's making me look at it through new eyes, and it's given me another level of appreciation for it.
These are great movies. Both of these movies so important to me as a human being, integral to my upbringing, and I hope integral to other people, listeners. I really hope that us talking about these movies, hopefully our passion being apparent has been infectious, and I hope maybe you've learned something. Maybe. So I think, let's wrap it up there. That's the end of the podcast. And on that note, we shall leave you, and hopefully we'll catch you soon.
Catch you later.